this morning, and I can tell you the weather was great. So I don't know where you live in London, but if you're
Northwest London, but it is overcast and it's not sunny at all.
there, we go. I was walking South Bank, and it was like, yeah, this is really nice. I enjoy having the sun. But you're telling me basically a big cloud's going to roll over the rest of London in a couple of hours, and it'll all be miserable for us.
We'll see. You'll see if it gets dark across my face. You'll know exactly what the weather is. I'm sitting in front of it.
Yeah. I think I caught the good weather coming through. So anyway, listen, we're live, everybody. Welcome to Brainfood Live on Air. It's episode 258, bringing it to you every Friday, no fail. And today, I'm super excited to be having this conversation because I think it's actually really important. I've been talking about programmatic advertising, I think, for almost as long as I've been talking about interview intelligence. And I'm like frustrated that we haven't got like a breakthrough moment, it seems, in terms of where we're at with programmatic. I am basically a programmatic job advertising truther, and I want to try and make sure everyone understands why I believe this. So I've stolen an hour of Yazad's time today, and he's going to help us talk us through it. So we have a slight change of scene in terms of how Brainfood Live traditionally operates. We're not going to be panel. We're not going to be talking around the houses. We're going to go straight to it, and we're going to figure out what the heck is programmatic advertising, who needs to know about it, why is it important, and how does it even work? Like, how do we get from, okay, I get it, to the point of implementation? Because we've got to figure out at what point do we stop actually going through it. And I know different territories are operating in different paces. So this is something I definitely want to explore. Okay, so before we kick off, let's just make sure all audio is going fine. If you can hear me, by the way, on Crowdcast, let me know in the chat whether the audio is fine for you. We are broadcasting this also live on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, everywhere. So if you can hear me in all of those places, let me know in the comment whether anything is fine. Thank you, Nathan. Crowdcast is always good, by the way. So it's all fantastic. I'm a bit worried about LinkedIn, but hopefully the folks in LinkedIn can hear me good as well. Okay, it looks like we're all good. So yeah, let's get on with it. Yaz, firstly, for the folks who don't know you, who are you and what is it you do?
Thanks, Hung. I'm Yaz Dalal. I am the Chief Growth Officer at Jovio. Jovio is one of the world's largest and most advanced programmatic job advertising and AI-led recruitment platforms. We're super excited to be part of your program today. And I, in particular, am happy to talk to you about what this thing is, programmatic job advertising. I've been at Jovio for less than 6 months, and so I have a lot of practice explaining to my mom, my brother, my sister, my dad, my aunts and uncles, what is this thing? So hopefully I have a good talk track.
To be honest with you, it's ideal. Because I think sometimes if you're institutionalized in programmatic, which I think some of the guys are in there that we know in the industry, and that's not to be disrespectful, but they're so deep in it, it's sort of somehow difficult for them to articulate to someone who's an idiot like me. And it's like, okay, can you like treat me like I'm 11 years old? You got to walk me through this. Don't talk about, all of these acronyms I don't understand. Or if you do say these things, then please explain what they are so that I can at least get it. So
that's
yeah,
what I should have done was, there's a blog post we have on jovio.com, which is the ultimate guide to programmatic job advertising. And what I should have done is copy and pasted that into ChatGPT and asked it to summarize it for an 11-year-old.
Yes, and then create pictures. Create pictures so that the 11-year-old doesn't have to read text. And Steve Levy, thank you, Steve, for distributing that. And so everyone, folks, if you want to save yourself an hour of time, you can actually just read that blog post.
No. Don't run away.
It's like, if you want to check out and just like read that blog post, go ahead. But I think it's a really good one. So if anybody's actually grabbing this on Crowdcast, want to share it on LinkedIn, do that as well. More people who know about it, the better. We just got to grok this and get over this scenario where, we don't understand what it is. Okay, so yes, take us through it, man. Programmatic job advertising. What is it? I'm 11 years old.
So first of all, if it's okay with you, let's start with a history lesson. Monster.com has temporarily changed its logo. For anyone who is following Monster.com or monster.co.uk on LinkedIn, they changed their logo, and it's a number. It's the number 30. And the reason for that is this month they turned 30 years old. So to give you an idea of arguably the world's oldest job board, the world's first job board, it started in 1994. is Monster.com and its different iterations that it had in those first few years. I spent the first 10 years of my career at Monster.com. It's some of the most fun I've ever had in my life. So I have a lot of love and admiration for that. But I mention them because we have basically been using a very specific way to attract talent to work in our companies for 30 years, and it's been the same way all along. Even if we look at really modern, cool, new variations on that, like LinkedIn is also a millennial. It's 30, getting close to 30 years old. The reality is they're kind of, in a way, old-fashioned. They are the faster horse, not the car. As we look retrospectively, job boards are arguably online newspaper classifieds. And the main difference is that it gives you the ability to apply while reading the posting, which a newspaper could never do. And it stayed that way for the first 20 years. But about 20 years ago, something new came along. Not in our space right away, but in consumer marketing. And that thing was called programmatic advertising. And I'm going to share my screen just so that you can take a look at some stuff I want to share with the audience. But the way that programmatic advertising worked in those early days was basically this concept of how do you use an automated system to buy and sell advertising space on websites. And to do that at scale and to do it at pace, these marketing firms and these ad firms developed algorithms that allowed them to analyze audiences, decide who to reach, how to reach them. And what they discovered was that as that innovation progressed, there was a massive amount of efficiency increase, precision increase, accuracy, that they were able to really start targeting people at a hyper level. I mean, it's the reason why the pair of trainers that you see advertised to you are very likely to be the trainers or sneakers that you actually want, or the bag, or the house that you want to rent, or the vacation you want to go on. They were getting more and more sophisticated. And the way that they were managing it on the back end also became more and more sophisticated. So I think right before 2010, there was the advent of something called real-time bidding. And this had a huge impact because it allowed advertisers to bid on the number of impressions they wanted to buy in real time. You think about it like a live auction, or maybe an even better analogy would be high-speed trading like they have on Wall Street. And so they start to introduce these concepts of a demand-side platform, or DSP, a supply-side platform, or an SSP. Again, very similar to the way that trading works in the stock market, but essentially it streamlined the buying and selling process, and it allowed them to do it at even higher speeds and higher accuracy.
Okay.
So
pause one minute, Yaz. Firstly, Steve Levy is posting some really cool links into the chat there. So please make sure you avail yourself to those links. Really good. Sort of basically putting the substrate as to what Yazad is talking about. Excellent stuff. Thanks a lot, Steve. Okay, tell me about DSP. So I hear this term, demand side platform, like. I'm 11 years old, Yazad. Obviously, an 11-year-old kid is not going to know about this, but do your best. Like, what is a demand-side platform?
Look, don't even think about these names because we're not going to talk about them again. Essentially, there are publishers, predominantly in our space, job boards, but in general, all websites are publishers. And then there are people who want to buy ads on those publisher websites, okay? So demand side is essentially the people that want to buy the ads. Supply side are the people who have the websites where you can place the ads. Think of it that way.
That's it. Yeah.
Right? Just supply and demand. It's very sort of econ 101. And it's a simple concept, but how do you automate that? How do you drive efficiency in that? How do you do it at massive speed? Why massive speed and scale? Because the internet has billions of websites. How do you know which ones you want to advertise on? How do you know where your audience is? And so with the advent of AI, as data analytics starts to progress, this concept of programmatic advertising becomes more and more sophisticated. Ads become more and more personalized, but also the ROI that those advertisers were getting starts to also improve. And I mean, to give you an idea, 84% of all advertising on the internet is bought programmatically.
84%. That's
Yes.
crazy. So
And it's
that's
going to get
completely
close
the
to 90%
opposite.
in the next few years.
And that's opposite of the job side, isn't it? So basically, the recruitment jobs are basically the opposite of the trends we're seeing elsewhere. So I'm just a general shopper or a surfer of the internet. I'm getting surfaced ads all the time. You're saying essentially 8 times out of 10 that ad is a programmatic ad rather than a duration-based ad or anything like that.
Yes. And the reason why that proportion is so high is because it works. Not only does it work, but every year it's getting more and more effective, which means, yes, the advertisers are making the ad companies, and basically Google and Facebook are ad companies, they're increasing their revenue, but they're increasing their revenue not because they're charging more, but because it works. Advertisers are moving more and more and more of their budgets to programmatic advertising to market their goods because it works. The targeting works, the efficiency works, the ROI is massive. And in fact, there's a very famous quote of Hung. I wonder if you know it. There's a guy named Jeffrey Hammerbacher. Okay, brilliant guy, data scientist. He's at Harvard studying. His buddy Mark Zuckerberg starts Facebook. Right, he ends up at Facebook, and the quote is super famous because he says, "The best minds of my generation are thinking about how to make people click ads." Now, he's saying it in a kind of a negative way because what he's saying is, in the past, all the brainiest people in America, in this case, were going to NASA or IBM or GE or Goldman Sachs. But by the early 2000s, where are they going? Facebook, Google. How do I get a job at these places? And how do those places make money? Their revenue is completely dominated by advertising income. The good news is for us as employers who want to use advertising to attract people, that means that the best brains in the world are hard at work trying to figure out how to help us. And so that's what we want to take advantage of. And that's essentially that evolution of programmatic advertising. And if we think about what that means for jobs, because that's our topic today, what is programmatic job advertising? The concepts are exactly the same as they are for consumer. Essentially, it's using programmatic advertising for recruitment to buy, place, and optimize job ads. Not only optimize the job ad, but also optimize the budget and do it automatically across the entire internet. So there's 2 big paradigm shifts here with programmatic job advertising. The first one is that you are leveraging technology to optimize. In other words, you're not posting and praying that people will apply. You're being hyper targeted and you're using technology to your benefit for that. But it's also the shift in thinking that I have to go to a single destination to find talent. That instead I can use the entire internet to find talent, because the entire internet is populated by people by definition. And so everyone is potentially an employee. How do I target the ones that are right for me?
All right, so let me just intercede here, Yaz. So to contrast that, some people might here be confused about job distribution and multi posting, which was kind of an innovation within old school duration based advertising, and it's probably still the default way in which ads are distributed in the recruitment space. So create the job in ATS. ATS then has a function which says, hey, we've integrated with these products. Do you want to click these job boards that you want to distribute on? You click them all, of course, boom, it goes out there. That is not programmatic. That is multi-job posting, and you're guessing by clicking those check boxes which destinations you want the ad to be shown. And you're hoping, not hoping, I mean, I'm presuming you have some evidence in the past or some sort of anecdata to tell you this might be the right place to put it, but it's not programmatic. Programmatic is different because the system will actually determine where the ads go, not you as a human user. Is that correct?
100%. So job distribution, which has been around for 20 years, is the use of technology to post to more than one job board at a time. And in other words, streamline the old-fashioned, sorry to say, process of I've opened a job requisition, or one of my colleagues has opened a job requisition, and my responsibility is to now put that out on the internet. And that the old way might be go post it on monster.com, go post it on LinkedIn, go post it on Career Builder, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. A job distributor, if it's really sophisticated, will actually be within your ATS and say, your requisition is open. Do you want to just tick all these boxes and I'll immediately post it for you to those job boards? But it's not a new technology in the sense, it's not a modern technology in the sense that all it's doing is taking something old-fashioned, posting to an individual job board, and allowing you to do multiple at a time.
Yeah, exactly this. By the way, quick question to the audience. Do you currently use the multi-job posting feature? Do you have that in the ATS? Let me know in the comments. I'd be interested to know generally what the vibe is. I'm thinking that's still like by far the predominant way in which jobs are posted by recruiters online. I don't think we're doing one by one anymore. Unless you're a small player or you're a company that doesn't have an ATS per se. I think most of us use multi-job posting. That's the way we distribute it. Okay, Amanda, thank you very much. A couple of people saying yes to this. No from Marvin. Marv, you're a hero. No, there's no judgment here. This is simply people using the tools that have been provided to you. And it is a step above the manual going into different logins and using different sites and what have you. So yeah, that is multi-job posting. That was great in a way, but it's not what we're talking about here.
Let me paint a picture for you of what used to be an ideal situation. The ideal situation would be that you have a recruiter who has, because of their experience, their knowledge, their expertise, they know off the top of their own head, when a rec comes in, they look at it and they say, right, this is for a nurse in one of my hospitals, and it's in northern New Jersey. I know that I'm going to post it on these 3 or 4 local New Jersey job boards. I know from my own experience these 2 or 3 nursing job boards, plus there's a message board that I know I can post the rec into a comment because I'm a very smart, experienced recruiter. And these 2 major job boards, I think historically have been good. And also my boss really wants me to make sure all of my jobs are on LinkedIn. So I'm going to do all that. And over these next 30 days, I'm going to see what comes in. All right. This is as state of the art as we can get with a human-led process, even though it feels like we're using technology. But I could tell you when my mom gets really frustrated with her phone and I say, what's wrong? And she said, well, I'm trying to use the camera to do X. I said, well, the camera doesn't do that. She said, but it should. She's got this elevated expectation of what technology should be able to do. And it's driven by how fast things are changing. She's never used a computer in her life, by the way. Her first experience with a device was her iPhone many years ago. So that same expectation should be in all of us today, which is, man, shouldn't I know immediately where all these nurses live? Shouldn't I know where to find the folks who are within a commutable distance? And shouldn't I just be able to get my ad out in front of them? And that's what programmatic job advertising solves. And so I'll give you a few examples.
Okay. No, before the examples, like how does it solve it? And I've now got an understanding as to why recruiters may still have that mental chasm to leap over, because they may not be shown how you do that. So in other words, it's a case of posting and then magically it happens. So firstly, how do you know where these people are? What's the technology behind that, Yaz?
We know for the same reason that smart recruiter knows. Experience. That it's been done before. He or she has tried those job boards before. So in their mind, they know that they might get some good candidates. But now when you automate that, when you have a machine instead of a person doing that, and that machine, instead of having done 20 recs in the past, which is what the recruiter, experience is based on, the machine may have done 2,000. And the data that comes with that experience, the machine retains all of it. It's not just what's top of mind for a human. The machine knows all of it. It can look at that nurse job posting and say, I know exactly what skills are required. I know from thousands of other similar job postings where to find these nurses. I also know where not to look. And what does that mean? It means that the machine can select the right publishers, i.e., the right websites, the right job boards.
Okay,
Whether,
so quick
yeah,
challenge on that, yes. So I think I get it. So basically, you're a programmatic service.
mhm.
You maintain a record of all of the job ads that have been posted and distributed. That you've distributed to different job boards. You can track the effectiveness of it because basically it's your software, and then from there you get progressively better because over time you're going to figure out, okay, this is definitely more effective than that, based on that historical information. However, it is dependent on the historical data that the programmatic service provider has already got. So there's a scenario, for instance, where there's a completely unique job that has never been posted, or that style of job has never been posted within the system, and that is actually something where you might be weaker. Is that correct?
The first half is correct. The second half is not.
Okay.
So we imagine, because again, we're using a human lens, we imagine that it takes time to build that experience. But for a machine that can operate at 1,000,000 times the speed that we can, it doesn't take a tremendous amount of time. I'll give you an example. In that same nursing job story, let's pretend that the machine has never seen a job like that before, but it knows some basics. It's in healthcare, it's a nurse, etc. It knows that it's in northern New Jersey. That job posting can be reposted by expanding, for instance, the title. If it says NICU overnight nurse, but then a similar equivalent title might be neonatal ICU overnight nurse or neonatal ICU overnight RN, there may be dozens or hundreds of variations, and the machine knows how to expand that title into those variations. The location may be a fixed town in northern New Jersey, but the machine knows, based on all the data it has from mapping software, from the zip code database, all the commutable zip codes around that location. So instead of posting to only that location, it will post to all the commutable locations and expand the location that way. Just these two things alone suddenly make that one posting maybe 100 or 500 postings.
Yep.
And
Yep.
because of speed and the way this is set up, programmatic advertising, it's not the old method of here's $300, I'm going to post my job for 30 days. It might be here's $12 and post it until I get 5 applications. Or here's $50 posted until I get 10 applications. And you're doing that on hundreds of job boards at once with hundreds of variations of your job posting. Now, in 4 hours, you've built up the experience to know which publisher works better than the others, which
Yep.
locations work better than the others, which titles, and you optimize to then reinvest more of your budget into the ones that work. And that's the whole point of the optimization. And now it's built up all that experience, not over a year or two, not over 20 or 30 job postings, but in a day.
Yeah, very well explained, Yaz, and I think that definitely, there's an iterative, experimental sort of way to think about programmatic job advertising. Not to say that the human being needs to experiment, but the system's kind of can experiment for you, and it can test whether certain ads are working or not. But we'll move on to that shortly. Just to expand a little bit on how you expand on job titles and adjacent job titles, job families, and so on. I'm assuming that programmatic job advertisers have built some sort of taxonomy of job titles and skills, right? That's one of the core sort of internal systems that programmatic providers have. Is that right?
Yes. Let's talk about terminology for a second, and then I will try and answer this question. Let's compare three different approaches, two of which we're very familiar with. One is the very smart recruiter with the big brain based on experience, knowledge, and expertise. And the way that that smart recruiter makes decisions is because they know essentially, if this, then that. If I see this kind of title, maybe I should think of this other kind of title because I've done that before. There is a technology-based version of that, which we all know is called the algorithm, which is a rules-based decision-making system that a computer can run at scale. That if I see this word, I know I can also use these 10 words. If I see this location, I know I can use these 20 other locations. But for an algorithm, we still have to provide, as you just said, a taxonomy for terminology. We have to provide it with a list of equivalent or adjacent locations, because the machine is not thinking on its own. It's simply following the rules that we've given it. In other words, there's still tremendous human intervention and preparation required. And so we're familiar with these two. When I keep referring to the machine, what we're actually talking about is artificial intelligence and machine learning. That if we can flood an outrageous amount of data, structured or unstructured, into the machine, and we tell it our main objective, your main objective, is to get the right people that match this job posting to apply. The machine, using its thinking, not rules that we gave it, then says, right, based on all of this data, I can see that even though this says Parsippany, New Jersey, that there are 437 zip codes that are 1 hour or less commute time to that hospital. So I'm going to advertise in those 432 zip codes in addition. I, using my brain, the machine's brain, can extrapolate that job title into 37 other job titles that I know are essentially the same. And so I'm going to create that many new postings with those titles. It also reads the job posting and picks out areas of the job posting that are vague or ambiguous. And based on its knowledge of thousands of other job postings for a similar role, where it knows the phrasing that's the most accurate and successful in driving applications, will convert to that content and republish, and keeps testing and testing and testing. It's not A/B testing, it's A, B, C, D, E, F, G to infinity.
Yeah, and actually Shazad has made a very important point in the comments there. Programmatic delivers the best results for high volume roles due to the availability of data. So it basically means the more data, the more intelligent, the more accurate the distribution appearance of those jobs might be. Tell me how the jobs actually appear on these different destination places, Yazad. There's got to be a huge back end sort of a series of relationships and integrations you have with all of those different publishers. How does that work? I mean, it seems almost impossible, isn't it? Is it just a massive amount of work to like get 10,000 job boards on board? I mean, how does that actually work?
This is an excellent question. The power or the strength of a programmatic job advertising company is not just the tech, but the combination of the technology and what we call the supply network, basically the long list of publishers of websites, and in our space, that tends to be dominated by job boards, that are in our network, that are connected to us through a technology pipeline, whether that's an API or an integration, that allows us to move very quickly back and forth between them. It's a combination not just of that publisher network, but also the connections that we make with applicant tracking systems. Again, if any of our listeners are familiar with high-speed trading on Wall Street, it's a very similar concept. The more streamlined we can make these technological connections between your ATS and the publishers in our network, the faster we can move, the faster we can deliver. And one of the interesting points, speaking of high speed, we believe that we are the fastest in the industry in terms of the amount of time that elapses between when a rec is published and when it shows up in our platform, 15 minutes, and our ability to then pass that over to our supply network. All of that in 15 minutes. Then, of course, we're dependent on the 3,000 plus publishers we have in our network to actually take that rec and all the jobs that we've sent it for that rec and publish them themselves. That can sometimes have a lag time or latency of a few hours. But in terms of grabbing from the ATS and passing to our publishers, 15 minutes. And the reason we want to do that at speed is because we want to post and remove posts at speed. So when we talk about optimizing and learning, we know, again, the machine knows what are the optimal times in a particular location to post. Because I think all the smart recruiters know that your job posting gets the majority of its responses, not just in the first week or first day, but in the first several hours after it's been posted. And so we optimize for that as well. We'll post on some job boards or on some sites for a few hours. We know at what point we will start to see diminishing return on that particular publisher. We'll pull the job down. Why waste time and money? Reinvest somewhere else. And doing that at massive speed.
Well, actually, the pulling down of the job is, in my opinion, what makes the programmatic advertise. Why I've become more of an overt evangelist for programmatic, because I do think it's going to be a vital tool for employers to essentially avoid being overwhelmed by job applicants. We're already seeing 2023, 2024 increase of applicant flow rate. I think that's just going to continue to accelerate as applicants get more effective in increasing their ability to apply to more jobs, using technology themselves to get better at this. Programmatic, in my opinion, may be the only fair solution against this. So yeah, we'll go back to how the jobs kind of appear and disappear in a moment. But I want to just persist a little bit with the supply network. How is the commercial agreement agreed between you and the supply network? Is it like they just want the jobs, or is it a case where there's some, like, how is it? Who gains on this? Like, what's the story on that side of things? Yaz?
Qui bono, who benefits? I will give you a couple of examples. First of all, the short answer is this is how they make money. So in general, publishers welcome all job postings, no matter who's providing them. However, there are job boards, and then there are job boards. There are some that are global job board platforms. There are some that are ultra niche. There are some that are super local. And so, of course, they'll operate slightly differently. In general, you talked about job distribution earlier. One of the very happy outcomes for most of our clients, but I think in general for programmatic advertising, is that in driving all these efficiencies and being AI-led, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, it's also solving for the headache of having to manage multiple vendors. So a huge number of our clients, for them, for the CFO in particular, the most significant benefit, one vendor, one invoice. So this is a huge piece of it. But to answer your question, for the job boards themselves and the commercial relationship, for the most part, that's managed entirely by us in this case, but by the programmatic job advertising company. There are certain vendors that a client may actually prefer to maintain their relationship with. Either they have a sweetheart financial deal with them, or they like playing golf with their sales rep, whatever the case may be. They choose to keep that relationship. At least for Jovio, that doesn't matter, because we're still managing the campaigns on that job board. Whether the client is paying them directly or not is entirely up to them. We're very, very flexible in how our clients want to manage their commercial relationships. But in general, I would say the vast majority, 90% plus of our clients, prefer for us to manage all of that for them, because it takes all that burden off of them. They're not signing hundreds of MSAs. And we're talking about hundreds and sometimes thousands of publishers. Imagine the amount of administrative work that's removed from a client not having to deal with that.
No, I mean, I can talk. The recruiters in the audience here will understand the concept of managed service provider, and programmatic perhaps can be seen as an advertising equivalent of an MSP, in the sense that you're sitting in between. You're the one interface for job advertising, ideally.
In fact, I will just to jump in on this point, I wouldn't liken it to an MSP. It is a managed service. And so we're quite clear about that. What we are offering is a managed service in an ideal state for an ideal client. They should be able to come to a provider like Jovio and say, I spend X per year on Y number of jobs. I'd like to reduce that amount, and I'd like to increase the number of qualified candidates I get. Here's the money. Can you do it? And we say yes, and we go and do it for them, and we give them an invoice. It's a completely idealized state, but my point is that is the aim in terms of simplification of this, that the entire set of activities required to execute on that is managed by us with tremendous input and collaboration with our clients. But the actual management of the platform, of the optimization, is done as a managed service.
Okay, that's a really important point, Yaz, and thanks for kind of zooming this out into that wider commercial user experience. So I basically am an employer. I look at the ad spend that I've spent in recruitment for the last year. It's £1 million, $1 million, whatever, over what I want. I go to Jovio and say, listen, I want to have at least this level of hiring and better. For less than £1 million that I've spent. Can you do it? You look at it, say yes, no, maybe. If it's a yes, right now, a classic agreement, again, idealized, there's an invoice out there, and then you execute based on that. And I basically, this is a do it for me kind of situation. It's plugged in, technologically integrated. The operational recruiters, their experience will simply be via the ATS, just create the job, post the job, but rather multi-post, there'll be some widget to say, go via Jovio or whatever programmatic sort of service they're using. Is that more or less how it feels?
Yes, but I also don't want to paint a picture that it's set it and forget it either. We want and need tremendous collaboration with our client. I'll give you a few examples, okay? First of all, at the very start, when we start working with a client, the very first thing we want to do is gather intelligence. And what we mean by that is we want to work with our client to gather all of their current and historical data. What does that mean? Their job requisition data, historical data on source of candidates, application numbers, hire data, and any other data that they may be able to provide from prior recruitment marketing efforts. Okay, and we think of this as their seed data. And then a good programmatic job advertising platform should be able to overlay on top of that seed data with what is the budget that our client has given us? What are the goals that our client has given us? So what is the number of hires, the number of qualified applicants, or the cost per hire, or the time to fill, so that we can create the client's target audience, or what we sometimes call a lookalike or similar audience. So we can sort of plan out, build out what that scenario looks like, and show them this is what we see, this is what we predict will be the outcome from the budget that you have based on your data mingled with ours and what we see on the internet. And these become the rules to ensure that the campaigns that we build stay on track and we maintain that discipline every step along the way. That this is what we've agreed. These are the rules that we've set up for these campaigns. So this is one example of where we really want to depend on our client to provide us with that intelligence. That's what's going to make us the most effective for them. The other piece I'll just mention where our client has a very big role to play is on making sure that their programmatic job advertising platform is delivering the ROI that they want. And in order to determine that, they need to have very deep, very clear insights into the performance. In fact, as a whole, this whole industry is referred to as performance marketing. And the reason for that is partly because of the commercial aspect. Clients pay for performance. It's usually a cost per application, but also because performance gets measured, performance gets optimized, performance should get improved. And so, for instance, we provide an entire predictive analytics console to our clients that allows them to track and analyze all the performance and the costs of all their recruitment media, job boards, search engines, social media, do it from a central console, all the way from attracting talent to the hire. And to crunch that, generate real-time insights on the ad performance, how much did each campaign cost, what publishers were better performing, what job groups, and do it all the way down to the job levels. The client should have complete visibility end to end, complete control, because of course they will give feedback on the entire job ad process. And that, again, it's not just on job boards, but some job boards, by the way, we haven't even talked about this, Hung. Not all job boards are equal in what they provision. Modern ones allow pay-per-click or pay-per-application models. Some of them are still a little bit antiquated, and they still do what we call duration-based postings, the original Monster model. Some of them do slot-based. LinkedIn is a good example of that. So we're covering all of those types of publishers.
What's slot-based?
Slot-based, I think a lot of recruiters it'll resonate with them, where the old model, duration-based, is I want 100 job postings, 30 days each. But after you post a job, now you have 99. So it decrements. Slot-based says at any given time, you can have X number of jobs live on our site. So you might buy 5 slots and post a job for 30 days at a time. So over the course of a year, you've used about 60 job postings, but you've never had more than 5 live at a time. So you have a slot.
Yeah, clear. Excellent. Let's talk about pay, how it's how performance is measured, because I think this is an important one. Because I think actually it probably adds to the confusion. Because so we know that duration-based pay, folks. I guess everyone knows what that is. Just a quick one to the audience. Duration-based pay is classic. You post it for a duration. That's what you get. 30 days, 15 days, almost always 30 days. But that's essentially how you roll with this. Pay per click is essentially the number of clicks that you get. Impressions, I think it can be sometimes called, where a user sees the ad and decides to click on it. You might be charged for a micropayment per click. And over time, it goes to a certain number, and you typically cap it at a budget so that you don't go excessively over the top. And then you have pay per applications. It's a little bit more sophisticated. Not only has this person been clicking around, but they've actually gone through and fulfilled. They've applied to something. This person has become a candidate and exists in some sort of funnel that the client has internally. And again, you might be able to cap the amount of budget on this. Now, the reason why I want to just address that description is because pay per application obviously went through a little bit of a muddying of the waters with Indeed's experiment last year, where they went from I believe a duration-based model to a pay per application model, and immediately customers were complaining that suddenly they thought they were paying $300 for a job, and they were being charged $5,000 or something, and it became scandalized, and they actually had to roll that back. Big PR disaster for Indeed. But Indeed were not doing it as a programmatic business. They was simply, as I understood it, simply doing duration-based ads that were simply charged on a programmatic way. Is that correct? Is my understanding correct there? Anybody let me know? So that I guess I'm addressing this because I think sometimes you can use pay per application in both old school advertising and also programmatic advertising, but those two things are not contingent. Is that right, Yaz?
I think so. And what we're seeing and hearing from a lot of clients today is, can we move beyond or further down the funnel than cost per application or pay per application? We have clients who are measuring internally and holding us accountable to not just cost per application, not just cost per shortlisted candidate or first interview, not just cost per hire, which sounds weird. How can you go further down the funnel than cost per hire? We have clients who want to measure cost per first swipe. because they have drop off between hire and when they show up for their first clock punch. So they want to do cost per first swipe. We work with Uber, and their big measure is cost per first trip. So the specificity of what they want to measure is going so far down the funnel beyond even what was traditionally the limit, which was hire. And we're seeing that demand more and more. And the reason for it is in the model you just described with that particular job board, is if you are priced per application, but you don't have any of the other motives that programmatic advertising has around tracking and optimization. I'm not saying that Indeed did this, but theoretically, a smart job board would then flood that job posting with applications. Well, that doesn't help if the quality is not there. And so a lot of employers are moving further down the funnel to say, we are not going to review cost per application as our main benchmark. It has to be focused on quality. Is it cost per shortlist, or even down to hire or post-hire experience?
All right, excellent stuff, folks. Just a quick mini break. We always do this in the middle of every show. Reason why is because Brainfood Live has to come off air. Of course, we'd love to continually stream nonstop, but we can't do that. And so what we don't want to be is an organization that starts a conversation, but then has to curtail it simply because we're going off. So very important that the conversation continues. This is an educational show, particularly an educational show. So if you're interested in this topic and you've got some value out of it, why don't you take a moment, grab your LinkedIn URL and stick it in the chat stream in Crowdcast if you're watching it there. If you're watching it on any of the LinkedIn channels, you should click again, copy your URL, stick it into the comment thread, and then make sure you connect with everyone else who's done the same. Everyone who is talking about or paying attention to this show today is interested in programmatic advertising. And in fact, we've got some really intelligent people. If you're just simply looking at some of the chat that's already going on, there's some leading experts, I would say, in the industry globally that are commenting on this show. Connect with those people. Even if you are like just following them in some way on LinkedIn, osmotically, you're going to get more educated on programmatic. So please go ahead and do that. Okay, all of this is clear. With regards to going down the funnel, this is very exciting, I think, for a lot of employers, particularly. This is good news for employers, probably bad news for job boards, etc. But you know what? That's the demand that's going forward. But the requirement is deep integration with ATS, right? Because there's no other way in which you could justify or describe.
I want to correct you on one thing. Sorry, Hung. Just because the words we use are so important. Deep integration actually is a term. So I don't want to say deep integration. Okay. Actually, deep integration is not required. What is required is a feed. Deep integration between technology platforms for a client can be long and arduous. And so what we've done and what any programmatic job advertiser worth its salt does is makes sure that they can operate efficiently with basic API feeds between an ATS and their platform, and between their platform and their network of publishers, in our case, more than 3,000 publishers, that we should have that API feed, and it's a bi-directional feed, so that not only are we able to take data in, but also send data back. So for an ATS, deep integration is not required. Simply a feed is adequate to make sure that that whole process works.
Yeah, appreciate the interjection. Yes, thanks for the correction there. That's a really important point, because it means that we're not talking about a huge implement systems integration project. It's like literally give me a feed, and that's like no effort whatsoever to connect to. So
it would be ideal. It would be ideal to have deep integrations. And our goal, just to, I'm trying very hard not to speak too much about Jovio in particular. Our goal is to have integrations with all of our ATS partners, and we have a number already. But I just wanted to emphasize to our folks who are learning about this for the first time, it's not a prerequisite, it's an ideal state.
Yeah, very, very good. Okay, good question, Steve. We're going to get to questions in a minute. In fact, let me just ask everyone to ask the question on the sidebar so I can get to them. So go to the Q&A feature on the Crowdcast, ask the question there. We'll get to them in a minute. If you're watching this on LinkedIn, just pop a question into comments and we'll fetch them back as well. Okay, Yaz, I think I interrupted you mid-flow. So what else are we looking at on screen here?
I'm just, while you were talking, I was just showing a few examples of some of the things I was talking about. In this case, centralized media buying. We're one of the very few in the world job advertising, programmatic job advertising platforms that's truly international. Now, what that means is, for the benefit of our clients, that we have reach in 30, 40 plus countries, multiple hundreds of job boards across the world outside the United States, which is wonderful. It also means that we need, and we do have, the ability to bid in dozens of currencies. One of the big benefits that our clients like is that we don't necessarily have to charge them back in those currencies. And when we do our reporting, most importantly, we also convert to a single currency. So it's hard to compare apples to apple performance if you're looking at something in pesos, pounds, euros versus a US dollar. We tend to bring everything into a constant dollar, and we do that in our invoicing as well, which, again, CFOs really, really appreciate.
Very good. Steve is actually making some very valid points here. He's talking about volume, like what is all enterprise focus. I think it's fair to say that enterprise generally use programmatic more so than any other category of business. He's actually just a straight question, like what's the threshold then? Like, what is the number of vacancies where it makes sense to use programmatic, and at what point are you refusing service?
Great question. So there's two questions in there. One, who's the primary audience or ideal client for programmatic advertising? And two, are there commercial thresholds, either from a business practice perspective or beyond which it simply doesn't work? So let me do those in order. Programmatic job advertising, I think, and we believe, is ideal for two different use cases. One, the obvious one, which we've talked about, which is high volume. Okay, we have a client, very well-known major technology and telecommunications provider, who has thousands of stores, retail stores around the country. They have an incredibly high attrition rate. So because their principal employee profile is someone young who might be doing it as a part-time job and not necessarily starting their career, the turnover is massive. Not only do they have high volume hiring, it's continuous hiring. They have 40, 50,000 plus employees, but they need to hire close to 40 or 50,000 people every year to maintain full staff. So that's a prime example. However, hard to fill roles are the other example. We tend to think that the highest cost per hires are CEOs, CFOs, the C-suite, senior leadership, where you're reaching out to the very high-end search and selection firms and you're paying 30, 40%, or even 100% of first-year salary. The reality is there are two roles in the United States, and there's similar statistics in Western Europe, that are nearly as expensive to fill, and certainly as a percentage of base salary. And those are registered nurse and commercial truck driver. A registered nurse, especially one with a very niche specialty like the one I was describing, neonatal ICU overnight nurse, can make upwards of $200,000 a year in the United States. And the cost for hiring that person can be $15,000, $20,000, $25,000 plus. For a truck driver worth their salt who's doing cross-country runs and has a certain number of years of experience and the right commercial licensing, they are making between $80,000 and $120,000 a year. There's been a shortage of truck drivers in the United States for 30 years. And those roles can cost somewhere between $5,000 and $15,000 to fill. So it's not so much the number of hires, it's the cost of doing that hiring that qualifies them to really strongly consider programmatic job advertising, because the premise behind programmatic job advertising is, I have this budget, I need this many applications, can we put them into the machine and make that happen? and do it accurately and with predictability. In other words, tell me now whether you'll be able to do it, how many applications can I get for this money, or can you save me some of this money? So those are the two principal audiences that benefit the most from this.
Okay,
And it's yeah.
I think that's really good. I think for the high volume, everyone understands. I mean, basically, you're already spending tons on advertising. Even on the cost alone, it's something you need to be thinking about. But also, you got to think about applicant sort of volume and so on. In the hard to highest category, I still don't think that answers the question that Steve mentioned. Though, like, you wouldn't do it for one job. It doesn't make commercial sense for a programmatic service to provide it for one job, does it? So, or does it? I mean.
Hung, I'll give you an example because I don't agree. So
okay.
If I were that telecommunications company and I only had to hire 20 customer service people to work in a mall, I'm not going to use programmatic advertising for that. My cost per hire is probably $200 or $300 per employee, and that doesn't make sense. If I'm a hospital and I have to hire 30 nurses a year, and last year I spent $10,000 cost per hire on a nurse, don't I have a $300,000 budget now? So if I have a $300,000 historic spend to find 30 nurses, then I should strongly consider programmatic advertising.
Okay, so now I think I understand where you're coming from. So let's it's a shift of perspective away from the number of roles, but to the difficulty of the hiring and actually the budget that you spent historically on hiring for that position.
Yes.
So the cost per hire calculation, right? So the company internally needs to think about, and for you guys, like, you don't care about the volume of jobs in this case, but you probably do care about minimum sort of order value, right? So there isn't a scenario where you would the reason why it's the cost per hire number is because you're not going to take on a job that is below a certain a threshold because it simply isn't going to be efficient or profitable for the business to operate. Can you give us that number, Yaz? I mean, I think some people want to know about this.
Sure. Happy to. And by the way, one of our major hallmarks from our founder, KJ Jain, is always about transparency. So I'm very happy to be transparent. Programmatic advertising, for all the reasons we discussed, is not something that you can equate to a $200 job posting. There is no such thing as let me post a job. The language is different. The methodology is different. So when I described earlier in our conversation that part of posting that nurse job is that it might turn into 1,000 postings on multiple publishers, that can't happen without a certain spend. You know, if you think about the way we drive a car, our mileage is lower, it's worse in town than it is on the highway, which is not really intuitive because aren't we going so much faster and using more power? But no, once we get going, we're coasting. So in order to kickstart the process in programmatic advertising, there needs to be a baseline spend, then the learning, then the optimization, then the results. And so in order to make that happen, it's not a $200 job posting. It may, I don't want to mix the metaphors, but a job posting for that nurse, we don't think of it as a posting, but the spend for that role might be $5,000. But the client is not thinking about it as a $5,000 spend. What they're looking at is how many applications did I get and how much did I pay per application, because that's the budget that they've given us. So it's very hard we have to do a mindset shift that we can't bring the same vocabulary and the same terminology over to programmatic job advertising. There is no such thing as a cost per post in programmatic job advertising. It's
I think that's clear.
Performance.
Yeah, you're paying on performance, and there needs to be I totally get the need for the budget, but I do think I wonder whether that may be the sticking point. Because like there's no the vast majority of recruiters. Well, actually, as a guess, I would say the majority of recruiters are probably operating in companies or in recruitment situations where programmatic is unlikely to be an option, simply because they're not encountering these types of scenarios, and because of that, they may not get the education when they do end up sort of working for an organization that does have that issue. We're coming really to the end of the show, though, and we have there's a bunch of things we haven't covered. So one of the things we want to cover is this idea of setting a budget per job. So in other words, you're not talking about per job, but let's say you want to suppress the amount of cost that you're potentially incurring, and this is how jobs appear and disappear. Can you quickly run us through that, Yaz? How does that operate, and typically give us a kind of a cleanse use case on that?
Sure. And I know I'm showing slides that are just evoking some of the stuff we talked about earlier, so it's not going to be related to what I say here. But I think for the folks listening, when you go back to your desk or you go back to your office, obviously I'm not in my office. I don't know. I don't think Hung is either. But when you get back to work after this call, maybe one thing to reflect on is this. The terminology has changed. The approach has changed. And for programmatic advertising, the question is not, should I post this one rec through programmatic? It's not a source to consider. It's a whole shift in approach. And frankly speaking, the decision-making around programmatic job advertising tends to sit at the corporate level, the head of talent acquisition, who has heard from all of his or her recruiters for months or years that we need to make that shift. But then to decide, we're going to move to programmatic job advertising because last year we spent X million on recruitment marketing. We did that based on some knowledge, some expertise, and some guesswork and hope. And it's 2024, and that's completely irresponsible. What we should be doing is paying for performance. So if we spent $2 million last year and we got this many applications, we know what our cost per application was. Let's go to the market and ask companies like Jovio or others, can you help us reduce this cost per application if we gave you this budget? So it's not, do I post this job through programmatic or not? It's, should we be moving our recruitment marketing strategy to programmatic advertising? And that's what so many of our clients have done.
Yeah, very, very good. Final question for you, Yaz. I'm rushing you. I do apologize, but I appreciate sort of running out of time, taking too much of your time also. Where are we in market adoption generally? So let's look at, you and I both UK. So UK-wide programmatic advertising, how many, so where are we in terms of numbers of job ads that are published, located in the UK that you believe are programmatically distributed compared to ones that aren't?
I don't know if there's any empirical data on this. Our observation is that the US is the most mature market when it comes to adoption of programmatic advertising for talent acquisition. And we feel that Western Europe is maybe 2 years behind, and that Asia, and if we focus on the developed markets in Asia, Southeast Asia, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Korea, India, are probably another year behind Western Europe. And I think that pace of adoption in talent acquisition is similar to what we saw 25 years ago when it was about adopting online practices for recruiting. So very similar, the US kind of just a step ahead, Western Europe a couple of years behind, and Asia maybe 1 year behind that.
Yeah, yeah, very, very interesting. Okay, Yaz, listen, we got much more to talk about, but we are out of time. So I just want to say thank you very much for spending an hour with us. It's been very educational for me, and I hope you've been educated on it also. This has been a different style of show. Let me know in your own sort of way, whether you want to put a comment in there or if you want to email me later, whether this style of show is useful. Getting basically an expert to come in and explain a thing that we may kind of have questions about, we don't 100% know about. Is that useful or not? Should we occasionally spin these types of shows into Brainfood Live? Yaz, listen, thank you so much for your time. Wonderful chatting with you. You can stop screen share now, by the way. And where do people find out more about Jovio, by the way? I think, Shazad has just put jovio.com in there. So if you're interested in the slide deck, I'm sure, Yaz, you'd be prepared to provision that. Basically, anybody get in touch with Yazad. I think he's out there on online. So yeah, jovio.com. Thank you, Shazad, on this. Okay, great. Listen, thank you for your time, Yazad, sorry. We'll be hopefully connecting soon. We're going to keep talking about recruitment advertising, and this is something I've got kind of a bee on my bonnet about. So let me wish you a very good afternoon, and we'll speak to you soon. Good weekend, by the way. Bank holiday weekend. So have a good long weekend as well, Yazad.
And the sun is out.
Coming. The cloud is over here. It's coming. We're swapped. Have a good weekend, Yaz.
Thank you very much, Hung. You too. Bye-bye.
Cool. I thought it was really interesting. So again, another experiment. I want to keep kind of doing different things with Brainfood Live. So yeah, I really enjoyed that. I thought that was super, super interesting. But listen, we're out of time. So we'll be back next week. If you enjoyed this type of show, please do subscribe to Brainfood on Crowdcast. If you're following on LinkedIn, you can just follow my page, and you get the updates via there. Next week we're going to be talking about, crikey, what are we talking about? Oh, we're going to be talking about talent acquisition to talent everything, expanding scope, folks. How are we going to move from talent acquisition to talent everything? Another thing I've got to be in my bonnet about is I do believe that TA people need to do more than just TA. We need to do talent management. We need to do internal mobility. We need to do talent intelligence. We need to do all of those things. Expanding scope. I'm going to speak to a bunch of recruiters that have done just that. They're going to help us educate what that means, the difficulties, the challenges, and so on, and why we should do it, basically. So if you're interested in that topic, it's available now. You can go ahead and register. Okay, that's about it. I've got to check out. So thanks for watching, everybody. I'll see you next week.